Hello, welcome to Oxford Heirlooms. In this video, we're going to begin the final part of project number 33 for the boys, which is to create a teacup bonnet to go with the diaper cover that we previously made. Now, the pattern that I'm going to be using is this little teacup guide. I'm not going to make this as frilly as this because this is for a little fella and not for a little lady. But this pattern is page 82 from out of the book French Hand Sewing for Infants by Sarah Howard Stone. Now I've got my pattern pieces that I created. I've got one piece for the top and the sides and another piece for the teacup back. Now I need to do a little bit of measuring. Let me push things up and out of the way just a little bit. I've got all my scraps of lace and ribbon and insertion left over from creating the little shirt. But the ribbon beading, let me see, it needs to go over the top of the bonnet. Okay, so it's that long. And then the back sides of the bonnet, so it's just slightly a little bit longer, so I have enough beading to do that. I measured my insertion lace. I had one piece left from the project, and I need to have 2 strips of it, and it wasn't quite long enough, but if you're like me, you save any piece of lace that's about at least 6 to 9 inches long or a little bit longer. So I had a little bit of insertion lace left over sometime in the past from a previous project. So it matches what I'm using. So I'll be using it. Now what I'm planning to do, let me move the back piece out of the side over to the side for just a minute. I'm going to start this by putting a row of beading with silk ribbon through the middle of the bonnet. Then I want to attach some insertion lace right next to it, like what I did on the shirt. And then so I'll put a piece of insertion lace on both sides. Now I will once again, I will need to line up my little lace motifs from side to side because that looks better when you at least attempt to match them. But as you see, once I get these 3 pieces put together, the top of my bonnet still needs to be a little bit wider. So I went digging through my stash and I found some insertion that for some reason I've already got Entredo sewed onto either side, which is okay because I'm going to need that. But that little insertion, just with that little dot, is going to be just wide enough to bring me to the edge of the pattern piece. And then I will finish this off by gathering lace and sewing it to the edges. Now on the back of the bonnet, let me get my back pattern piece. I really don't need the extra insertion lace on the back, but I did need it for across the top in the bonnet, for the top of the bonnet. Okay, so let me begin. I just dropped a piece of insertion lace, but I'll pick it up in a minute. Okay, I'm going to begin by sewing my first insertion lace to the side of the beading. Now the beading has a bobbin side, which is right here, and it has a top side, which is right here. Now since I'm going to use this on both the top and the bottom, up here I'm going to, with my blue pen, I'm going to write the word top, all 3 letters, since they're not symmetrical. If it gets turned over, I'll know it's backward. Okay, Now, this is Moline lace, so I have to make sure that the fuzzy side is down. Now, the first pass of the Moline lace, I don't have to worry about where the motifs are, but when I begin to attach the second piece of Moline lace, I will need to line up my motifs. Okay, but before I can attach insertion to my beading, I need to trim the batiste from one side, the excess batiste, so that I'll be ready to begin to zigzag this insertion lace to the beading. Okay, this will take me a minute to get this trimmed off, and then I'll begin to sew. Okay, so that beading is trimmed on one side, and I've got my beading with the top side up and my Moline lace with the top side facing me. So I'm going to butt these together and begin to zigzag them into place. Let me get my thread underneath the presser foot. Okay, all right. Now let me make sure I'm going in an entre-deux hole and not piercing the entre-deux ladder. Okay, I'm good. Okay, so I can begin to zigzag the insertion to the beading. I'm going in the entre-deux hole on the left and catching the header of the lace on the right. Since this is straight, I can go a little bit faster than I can when the lace is either gathered. Let me see if I can zoom in a little bit. When the lace is either gathered or if I'm going along a curve. Okay, this will take me a minute to get all the way down along the edge of this beading, so I'll be right back. Okay, I've got one side sewed on and I trimmed the other side of my beading. Now I'm looking at my other piece of Moline lace and I am trying to position it where the motifs will be symmetrical to each other. Let me make sure I'm in an entre-deux ladder and not stabbing the entre-deux rung. Sometimes I do the first couple of stitches by hand. Okay, there we go. I think I got it going on where it's pretty much lined up. It may not be perfect, but I think that when you try to line this up, the final product looks a little bit nicer than if you just put it on willy-nilly. Okay, so once again, I'm catching the entre-deux ladder on the left and the header of the lace on the right. Okay, so this will take me a minute to get this sewed on, so I'll be right back. Okay, I've got my insertion sewn on both sides of that beading. I haven't run the ribbon through yet, but I will in a little while. Now, before I attach the second insertion lace next to the first insertion lace, I have to do a little bit of thinking. I want to have this extra insertion lace on the top sides of the bonnet, but not on the back. So I don't want to sew it along the whole length of what this fancy panel is right now. So I need to, let me put my pattern pieces up, and I want to try to figure out how best to, okay, I think I got it on the first try. I want the top of the bonnet to be symmetrical from side to side. Since the beading has these little bouquets on it, it is directional. The Moline lace wasn't directional, but it had a front and a back. And I see when I line this up, it lines up with the second hole of the little beading over here and the second hole of the little beading over here. So let me cut that off through that second hole, and this will turn out to be the top sides of the bonnet. And when I line this up with my bottom piece, I end up catching most of the bouquet on either end. So let me trim that about 1/4 of an inch off. I really, as far as the beading goes, you know, what I had ordered for this project, I don't have anything left now. That little 1/4 of an inch that I just cut off was the end of it. Okay, so let me put my back piece off to the side, and begin to work on sewing the bead. Let me make sure that's not a Moline lace, but it may have a bob inside. Okay, okay, so I'm going to cut a strip a little bit longer than my bonnet. Since I need 2 pieces, I'm going to cut 2 strips, and then I'll proceed to attach this to either edge of the bonnet. Now I still have a little bit of my insertion that's going back in my stash, but that's okay. Like I mentioned earlier in the video, if I have a piece of lace that's like 6 to 9 inches long or longer, you know, you never know when you might need it to create like a little bonnet or a bodice or something. So I save them. Okay, so 1 piece at a time. Now this is not directional. And as I'm looking at it, I really can't tell if it has a bobbin side or not, so I'm not going to worry about that. So I'm going to trim the batiste from one side of where I have attached the entredo to it, and then I'll begin to zigzag this to the side of my fancy panel. But this will take me a minute to get this trimmed and start to sew, so I'll be right back. Okay, I've got my excess batiste trimmed from one side of this narrower insertion lace, and I'm going to start at one end, and I'm going to zigzag this narrow insertion lace to my wider insertion lace, and make sure I'm going in the little entredo hole and not stabbing the entredo ladder. Okay. My foot pad is getting away from me. Well, I tell you what, if anybody's got a trick about keeping a slippery foot pedal from migrating away underneath the sewing machine, you know, drop a comment below and let me know. Because I feel like I do a lot of searching for my foot pedal. Okay, so this will take me a little while to get this zigzagged on and get the other piece zigzagged on also. Okay, so I'll be right back. Okay, I've got that narrow insertion lace sewn on both sides, and since it already had entredo on both sides, I end up with a piece of entredot on either side of the bonnet where I'll attach my gathered lace in a little bit. Now, what I did while I was off camera, I forgot to video this, but I wrote the word top on the front side of the back of the bonnet, and I went ahead and sewed a little piece of entredot on either side. Okay, now I need to sew a piece of entredot at the bottom of the back of the bonnet and on either end of the top of the bonnet. But before I do that, I need to weave in my silk ribbon. Now let me see how long my silk ribbon, if it's long enough, because I'm using my scraps left over from making the little outfit. Okay, I can do that with one piece of ribbon. Okay, so I'm going to begin to weave this ribbon in. This will take me a minute, and I'll do it off camera. But let me weave a piece of ribbon in to both the top sides and the back of the bonnet. Okay, I've got my ribbon, woven into both the back piece and the top side piece of the bonnet. And I have cut some little pieces of entredot. I'm going to sew a piece of entredot to the bottom of the back and to both ends of the top. So let me start, I guess it doesn't really matter. I'm going to pin my entredot to one end of the top sides of the bonnet, and then I'll sew that into place. This is why I had to put the ribbon in first, because I need to catch the ribbon in the entredot to keep it from falling out of the bonnet. And then I'll pin the other piece on and sew it on in just a minute. Okay, so using a straight stitch, let me reset my machine. I'm going to simply sew this entredot to the end of the bonnet. Let me see if I can zoom in a little bit. Okay. Okay, now I'm going to go to the ironing board and I'm going to press this towards the underside of the bonnet, and then I'll come back and zigzag. Okay, I've been to the ironing board and I pressed my entredot seam to the inside. Now, starting at where this entredot ladder is going to make a curve, I'm going to do several zigzag stitches in the same place to tack it into place, and then I'll zigzag along that edge of the bonnet. Okay, now when I get down to this other little 90-degree junction on the outside entredot ladder, I will tack it in place by doing some zigzag stitches. Just a couple, well, several, to tack them into place. Okay, now I've already done the other end and the back of the bonnet. So the last thing I'm going to do today is I'm going to use my specialty scissors, and from the back side, I'm going to trim this excess batiste from close to the zigzag line. Let me see if I can get in here. There we go. Okay, the ingenue is a little bit thick, so you got to kind of push on the scissors. But these specialty scissors are great for doing this, because with the blunt tips, I don't have to worry about the sharp little points accidentally getting into the lace and cutting any of the lace. So let me finish cutting, trimming some of this off. There we go. Okay, now in the next video, not in this video, we will continue to work, excuse me, on the bonnet by sewing the gathered lace around the outside edges on all 4 edges of the top side and on 3 edges of the back. And eventually this bonnet will fit together, forming a T, and we'll sew some silk ribbons onto the corners so that it will tie onto the infant's head. But this is looking real well, isn't it? Okay, let's see if I can make that kind of look like a bonnet. Okay, so constructing the fancy panels for the top and the back of the bonnet was what we were doing today. Thank you.